If you happen to be flying on board a Philippine Airlines domestic flight, there is something interesting you should check out on your ticket or boarding pass. Along with the standard flight number with the Philippine Airlines flight code PR, you might also notice the words operated by PAL Express on both documents. It may sound like a different airline, but your flight booking was surely done with Philippine Airlines. What you are seeing is a reminder of a past airline that is now long gone into Philippine aviation history, Air Philippines, an airline that during the late 1990s and early 2000s, it was the third main airline in the Philippines along with Philippine Airlines and Cebu Pacific. While operating separately, the airline's ownership is actually linked to Philippine Airlines, which led it to it becoming the main part of the domestic operations of the Philippine flag carrier. So with that said, this video will highlight the history of Air Philippines and how it became part of Philippine Airlines today. Before PAL Express, the airline was started as Air Philippines during the 1990s as the skies over the Philippines was liberalized, with Philippine Airlines losing its national carrier status. As a result, competition was opened up with the formation of new airline companies to challenge Philippine Airlines such as Cebu Pacific, Grand Air, and the predecessor to Air Asia Philippines, Asian Spirit. Some of the new challengers in the Philippine aviation space had their start thanks to conglomerates, and one of those groups was the Welex Group, led by the chairman of the company, William Gatchalan. In 1993, Air Philippines would be formed under the Welex Group, though it wouldn't be until 2 years later in 1995 that the airline would be incorporated with its base at the Subic Bay International Airport, the home of a now closed U.S. naval base north of Manila. A year later, in 1996, Air Philippines would welcome its first aircraft, a Boeing 737-200, and it would launch its first flights to Zamboanga in Mindanao and Iloilo City. The airline would eventually grow its domestic network and shift its operation hubs to Manila and Cebu, though early on, the airline would face financial problems and temporarily suspend operations in the late 1990s. For a time in the late 1990s, Air Philippines had some foreign investment from Uland Airlines based in Taiwan, which purchased a stake in the company, before one of the more prominent names in the Philippine aviation industry, Lucio Tan, would enter the scene. Lucio Tan is one of the more prominent figures in the Philippine business scene, with multiple companies under his business portfolio. One of those companies was actually Philippine Airlines, which, by the mid-1990s, Tan would become the majority shareholder of the former national airline. In 1999, Tan would add Air Philippines to its business portfolio along with Philippine Airlines, and Air Philippines would eventually be granted approval for international routes to Hong Kong, Japan, South Korea, Taiwan, and the US. As Air Philippines would continue to grow domestically, it took on more 737s, the Dash 300s and 400s from Philippine Airlines, and between 1998 to the 2000s, the airline actually operated 3 McDonnell Douglas MD-82s. Domestically, Air Philippines would become the third major airline, part of the big three of the 2000s, along with Philippine Airlines and Cebu Pacific. However, the airline's international ambitions did not take off as expected, though it did operate some regional charter flights. Into the 2000s, Air Philippines' domestic operations was on par with Philippine Airlines and Cebu Pacific between major cities in the Philippines and Manila and Cebu. Though to facilitate more business cooperation between the two Lucio Tan carriers, Air Philippines' domestic flight operations at Manila would shift from the old domestic terminal, which we now know as Terminal 4, to Philippine Airlines Terminal 2. and the airline would be rebranded as PAL Express in 2008. As it shed its old livery, the airline would also retire its older 737s, and the now PAL Express would take on some new turboprop aircraft such as the Bombardier Q300 and Q400s, which, between 2008 to 2010, the airline would operate secondary routes from Manila and Cebu using these aircraft. During this time, Philippine Airlines was consolidating its operations with Air Philippines, now the PAL Express. However, Cebu Pacific would overtake Philippine Airlines as the top domestic airline in the Philippines using its budget carrier model. As a result, Philippine Airlines saw a change was needed, and to effect those changes, it would use the former Air Philippines, now PAL Express. While not bringing back Air Philippines completely, in 2010, Philippine Airlines would bring in Airphil Express, taking some of the branding elements of the former Air Philippines into a new budget airline. This new airline would seem to emulate Cebu Pacific with the Airbus A320 aircraft leased through Philippine Airlines, along with the turboprop Q300s and the Q400s. The airline would continue to operate as a third major airline brand in the Philippines, this time with a budget airline model. When launched, the airline served 1.9 million passengers during its first year, jumping from having a market share domestically 2.9% to 11%, and it became one of the fastest growing carriers in the Philippines at the start of the 2010s. The airline used some elements of the former Air Philippines brand recognition while also being under Philippine Airlines. In a report on the Philippine Star back in March of 2010, Airphil's chairman of the board at the time, Dominic Chua, was quoted saying, quote, "As we bless our first A320 and launch as a new and more vibrant image to the market, we boldly show our competitors that we are still here and we intend to stay, and Airphil Express shall once more rise to the challenge, true to its vision and mission, and to be the premier low-cost carrier not only of the Philippines but of Asia." At the time, Chua also pointed out to the plans that the airline had in the early 2010s, saying, quote, "Together, we will develop new routes and reach more destinations both in the domestic and regional areas. With low fares, we will compete, and with our excellent services, we will prevail." Airphil Express would continue to expand domestically, taking up a domestic market share of 19% in 2011, before opening international flights to Hong Kong, China, Korea, and Malaysia. Despite these ambitions to become the premier low-cost carrier in the Philippines, Airphil Express would not be able to overtake Cebu Pacific's market dominance. In 2013, another Philippine conglomerate, the San Miguel Group, would become the majority shareholder of Philippine Airlines, and moves were made to return back to the more familiar Philippine Airlines branding. As a result, in 2014, Airphil Express would once again be rebranded as PAL Express. That same year, the Lucio Tan Group would once again become the majority shareholder of Philippine Airlines. While Air Philippines started separately, its history has been linked along with Philippine Airlines even as it operated as a separate airline company. Today, what was once Air Philippines is now PAL Express, part of two brands in one airline. While Philippine Airlines does operate the international flights, PAL Express is focused mostly on the domestic flights, though both share the same branding and bookings can be done on the Philippine Airlines website. There isn't much difference in branding and the in-cabin experience, If you happen to check your flight booking or boarding pass on a Philippine Airlines domestic flight, you might see the words operated by PAL Express. At the front of the aircraft just below the cockpit, there may be some words typed in boldface saying, quote, operated by Air Philippines Corporation, which happens to be the business name of PAL Express. Business-wise, PAL Express is a subsidiary of Philippine Airlines, operating as a full-service airline with a budget model. When you purchase a ticket with the airline, similar to other budget airlines like Cebu Pacific, there is no baggage allowance on the lowest of fares. Also similar to most budget airlines, the PAL Express Philippine Airlines sourced A320s and the Q400 turboprop aircraft have a majority economy class configuration without a business class. Instead, the PAL Express premium product is called Comfort Class. While sharing some similarities with the budget airlines, PAL Express also does have some similarities to a full-service airline, like offering snack and beverage services during the flights. Passengers can enjoy frequent flyer benefits on Philippine Airlines Mabuhay Miles program. And premium Mabuhay Miles and business class travelers can enjoy lounge access before their flights. Operations-wise, the airline's aircraft maintenance and servicing is done by its parent company, Philippine Airlines. As for the history of the aircraft that operated for Air Philippines and now PAL Express during its time, as mentioned early on, Air Philippines was once a major Boeing aircraft operator with 737s. Since Air Philippines retired their 737s in the late 2000s, the Philippines has not had a major airline operator use narrow-body Boeing aircraft on domestic flights. That said, Air Philippines, while started separately, has had its history linked with Lucio Tan and Philippine Airlines, even as it became the third major airline operating in the 1990s and 2000s. Air Philippines was late to enter into the budget airline model and modernize its fleet compared to Cebu Pacific and Philippine Airlines. And definitely the support of Philippine Airlines was much needed for the airline to continue. As for Philippine Airlines, using PAL Express to continue its operations domestically was a smart move for its books. Using a mix of a business model of full service and budget airline, Philippine Airlines is able to use its brand to market and sell tickets domestically while keeping its costs low to compete with Cebu Pacific. While in line with Philippine Airlines, PAL Express aircraft are primarily focused on domestic flights, which allows for more quicker turnarounds without shifting aircraft between terminals, especially now where the domestic flights are operating out of Terminal 2 and international out of Terminal 1. But more importantly, these aircraft will not necessarily have the premium seating that we see on international flights that likely will not be filled on most domestic routes, except to or from the major cities such as Cebu, Iloilo, or Davao. And it just makes sense as most routes within the Philippines operates within an hour or less. So there isn't much need for premium cabin experiences, as we have clearly seen with the success of Cebu Pacific and now AirAsia Philippines. So PAL Express is just a response of Philippine Airlines to lower their costs operating domestically in the Philippines. While Air Philippines may be long gone in history, what's left of it now operates as a major part of Philippine Airlines' domestic operations. That's all for now. I definitely hope you enjoyed this video. If you have any personal stories about your experiences and memories from Air Philippines all the way through its last incarnation of Air Phil Express, I definitely would love to hear your stories. In the meantime, I definitely hope you enjoyed this video. If you liked it, please like, comment, share, and subscribe. This has been Flights in Asia. Thank you for watching and have a great day.